Today, the lesson is the first of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about ancient Greece. And this is a really important chapter because it gives us the basis for democracy and this form of government in which people have rights to rule through voting. And this is really one of the key developments in our history. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on this chapter. And especially this section gives us a little bit of background with Greece, why they were focused on being city-states, why they were separated based on geographic boundaries. To begin, let's talk about geography of ancient Greece. Some of the key features of Greece include a very mountainous terrain, rough peninsulas into the Mediterranean Sea, and also about 2,000 islands that jut out into the Aegean and Ionian Seas. One of the important things about Greece is understanding that sea life, seafaring, sea trade really shaped Greek civilization. I'll show you on the map here. You can see that here's the Aegean Sea. Here's mainland Greece. Okay, here's the most famous city-state of Athens, and here's the other famous city-state of Sparta. This region here, this peninsula here, is called the Peloponnesus. There was a war between Athens and Sparta called the Peloponnesian War, which is named after that. But then also here in modern-day Turkey, this is modern-day Turkey over here. This is also a spot where Greece controlled some lands. Now, going back to the lesson, we'll go here to point number 2. We're just going to talk about those seas. The Aegean, the Ionian, and the Black Seas were important transportation and also trade routes. So we talked about Greece needing to trade quite a bit. Sea travel was very necessary for them because they really had a lack of natural resources such as timber, precious metals, and farmland. So therefore, if you lack those natural resources such as forest regions, precious metals like bronze, copper, tin, and then also suitable farmland, this is a reason that you're going to have to take the things that you do have. For Greece, they had olives and they had other forms of writing and other tools that they've developed and technology. They're going to have to trade those ideas and products for the things that they didn't have, like wood, stone, so on and so forth. Let's talk about the land. 3/4 or 3/4, or if you want to take it as 75% of ancient Greece was mountainous terrain. Mountain ranges divided the land into a number of small, differing regions, and these mountains created natural dividers, which led to the development of small, independent communities. We're talking about city-states here. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Independent communities kind of basically means city-states. Greeks gave their loyalty to these small, independent political units instead of one singular government. So when you're talking about Greece, you're talking about people from Athens, people from Sparta. They were known as city-states. If you ask them where they're from, they're not going to say Greece. They knew the concept of being Greek. They called it Hellenistic civilization or Hellenic civilization, but they really would have said, I'm a Spartan, or I'm an Athenian, or I'm an Ephesian, so on and so forth, whatever city-state they were from. Now, only about 1/4 of the land in Greece was suitable at all for farming. So they had a lack of farmland, they had a lack of agricultural land, and this meant that they really had to trade for the things that they didn't have. Also, because you lack farmland and fresh water sources like rivers and lakes, this is going to mean that the population in Greece is not going to be able to be very large. Historians generally estimate that no more than a few million people lived in ancient Greece at any given time. So what's important to understand is that as we go through all of the accomplishments of the Greeks, it's always good to go back and remember that they were very small and not very heavily populated. So what they accomplished and the feats that they did in military are very impressive. Capital letter D talks about the climate. The Mediterranean climate is fairly moderate throughout the year. This is kind of like a fall or spring type temperature system that we're used to. It's moderate temperatures, 50s, 60s, 70s, nothing too high, nothing too low. This supports an outdoor lifestyle. This means that the Greeks are generally going to be physically fit. This is one of the reasons why they begin the Olympics. The Olympics start with the Greeks. We'll talk about that in a later lecture and lesson. But this outdoor lifestyle led to athletic nature, but then also good military development. Roman numeral 2 is going to talk about the earliest of the Greek city-states / the start of their civilized process. It's called the Mycenaean Civilization. The Mycenaeans are a former group of Indo-Europeans. These are people from the steppe lands, kind of modern day Russia / Ukraine. They settled in the Greek mainland around 2000 BC. Mycenae became the capital city. I'll show you that on a map, which is just a few pages down in your text. Here you can see some ancient Greek sculpture. Here's Athens right here. This is a scene of Athens. This is a Greek chariot pulled by a horse. Here is Mycenaean Greece. This is around 1250 BC. Mycenae is located right here on the Peloponnesus. Sparta is kind of down here, but Mycenae is right here, pretty much right in the center of ancient Greece at the time. And this showed you some of the trading routes that the Mycenaeans participated in. So this is where Mycenae was. This was Mycenaean Greece, one of the earliest Greek city-states. Okay, now, one of the things about Mycenae is that it had a 20-foot thick defense wall. It was a place where a warrior king could go out, attack surrounding villages, and then fall back behind these walls. The Mycenaeans conquered other places such as Tiryns, and they even controlled Athens at some point in time. These kings dominated the Greek mainland from about 1600 down to about 1100 BC, so a good 500 years in power. One of the things that's also important to note is that the Greeks eventually came into contact with another ancient group called the Minoans. Now, the Minoans is something that we have learned about in the past. Back in chapter 3, they were another seafaring trading group. They did a lot of travel by the sea. They had some major developments. But around 1500 BC, through either trade or possibly warfare, the Mycenaeans came into contact with the Minoans. The Minoans' mainland was on Crete, which on the map, Crete is right here. So the Mycenaeans, obviously pretty close if you're sea traveling to Crete, where the Minoans are at. So there's going to be some cultural diffusion, some cultural interaction, some trade, possibly some war. Now, the Minoan seafaring lifestyle had a very big impact on the Mycenaeans. They actually adopted that lifestyle. The Mycenaeans also adopted the Minoan writing system, which was a pictograph form. They also had certain letters, like the Greek A, B, C, so on and so forth. The Mycenaeans also then adopted the Minoan religious practice, which was a belief in many gods. Okay, the Greeks were polytheistic, the Minoans were polytheistic. Art was something that the Minoans really focused on: frescoes, stone sculpting, politics, how you govern, okay, and also literature. A lot of these concepts were taken by the Mycenaeans from the Minoans. In capital letter C, we'll talk about a mythical war called the Trojan War. Okay, the Trojan War was fought for 10 years, what we believe. If it did occur, it would have been a 10-year war during the 1200s of the BC era. It would have been the Mycenaeans versus the Trojans, which are from the city-state of Troy, which would at that time be located in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. This is a legend. It's a myth. It states that a Greek army besieged and destroyed the city of Troy because a Trojan prince named Paris had kidnapped Helen, who was the wife of a famous Greek Mycenaean king named Agamemnon. There's a famous movie about this with Brad Pitt. He plays Achilles, the famous mythical feature. It's called Troy. You might want to check it out if you have a chance. It's a pretty cool film. The Trojan War, though, by definition, fought sometime around 1200 BC. It was led by a Mycenaean king who attacked the independent trading city of Troy. The Mycenaeans were victorious. One of the things that we have learned recently is that it's believed that the Trojan War is based on fictional stories, myths. However, there is some archaeological evidence in the recent past that suggests that some of the events talked about in the epic poem by Homer may have been based on real cities and people. Most of what we take from the Trojan War comes from the great epic poem author and storyteller Homer, who wrote and authored and basically passed down his words through speaking and spoken language, a poem called epic poem called the Iliad. And that's where most of our information for the Trojan War comes from. But we're developing new findings on a daily basis in modern day Turkey. Roman numeral 3, to close off our study of the ancient Greeks. We will have 4 more sections on Greece, so this is just our opening section. Greek culture declines under a group called the Dorians. Shortly after 1200 BC, just after the Trojan War, Mycenaean Civilization collapsed. They were attacked by a group of sea raiders. We're not exactly sure where they were from or who they were, but they burned down many Greek cities. Many Greek cities were destroyed. The Dorians are a group of Greek speakers that migrated into mainland Greece sometime after the Mycenaean culture collapsed. We don't know a whole lot about Greece during the Dorians' time because they did not adopt the Mycenaean writing system. So they didn't necessarily have a system of writing. So a small gap in Greek history exists from about 1150 to 750 BC. During this time, the only real history that we have is based on the epics of Homer. Homer was actually a blind man who was known throughout Greece and other parts of Europe and Asia as being a great storyteller. Epics are narrative poems, so stories that are in a poetic form that celebrate heroic deeds. Homer created his epic poem sometime between 750 and 700 BC, so around those 50 years there. His 2 most famous works you probably have heard of. Hopefully you'll study them in your English class or your world literature class, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Next is capital letter C. The Greeks are also well known for creating myths. So a lot of what we have with Greek history is kind of blurred between was it reality or was it part of a mythical story? Myths are traditional stories about the Greek gods. Remember, they were polytheistic. They sought to explain the mysteries of nature and the power of human passion. The Greeks had many gods, and they attributed human qualities such as love, hate, and also jealousy to their gods. The Greek gods, though, unlike humans, lived forever. So they were immortal, and they kind of controlled the atmosphere. The Greeks believed in gods of the rain, gods of the wind, gods of the sun, so on and so forth, and they had power over the geographic and climate patterns. We will be moving into section 2, which will dive a little bit further into ancient Greece. We'll start talking about Athens and Sparta, the Peloponnesian War, Greek life, Greek culture, democracy in the subsequent lessons that we have from chapter 5. Thank you.